Hey, everybody, welcome back to the End in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin, and we have a long time episode coming your way. Thanks so much for being here today, Dre.
Thank you for having me on, Kate. I'm looking forward to it.
So excited to just learn more about you. And can you just start off by telling us what you do and what you help your clients achieve?
Sure. So my company is called Work on Your Game, and what we do here is we work with professional entrepreneurs on systematizing and scaling their business up from the six-figure level to the seven-figure level, based on pulling the tools and attributes that I learned from the sports world. My background as a professional athlete, uh, four pillars specifically: mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability.
Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit how your transition went from being in sports to professional entrepreneurship support and mentorship, I guess?
Sure. It started because I was actually on the internet publishing on social media before it was social media. So I was publishing videos on YouTube back in 2005 when it first came out. And this was mostly to basketball players, just showing them how to practice. And over time, the players, about 5 years into it, they started asking me about the mindset behind my disciplines. And I started talking about things like discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. From there, what happened is a bunch of course, the athletes, they appreciated what I was sharing, but also people who were not athletes started finding my content on YouTube because of the mindset stuff. And they would say, "Hey, Dre, I don't even play a sport, but the way that you talk about mindset, that stuff can apply off the court to people like myself as well." So that planted a seed in my mind that there were people out there that the mindset piece would be useful for, even if they never played a sport. And that was good for me, Caitlin, because I was always considering what will I do after sports, because I didn't really want to become a trainer or a coach. So I needed to figure out a way that I could give value to people who did not play sports. So the mindset piece turned out to be that thing. So by about 2015, at this point, I'm making content about both mindset and playing basketball. I dropped the basketball part when I stopped playing in 2015, and I just focused on mindset for probably about a 5 year period. It was just mindset without the sports, but I would, of course, reference sports as the background. And at that point, I'm selling courses, training programs, of course, to athletes I had already been selling. I'm making courses and programs on mindset. I start my speaking career, speaking business at that point, and then done a little bit of coaching. And it was around 2020 when I really started to focus more on our consulting and coaching program, because it was at that time there were no live speaking events for a little bit, and then people pivoted to the digital thing. But at that time, I really didn't want to pursue speaking as much as I had been up to that point. I just didn't like the nature of the business. So instead, I started focusing on the internal, which is basically coaching and consulting businesses and coaching people. And that's what I've been focused on for the last 5 years. Still do speaking, but I don't go chasing down leads like I used to. I let them find me. So that's pretty
I
much what my business is today.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking us through the journey. A lot of our listeners are earlier on in their careers, maybe some are even 2 to 3 years in, but they
Mhm.
most of the time come to this show, as you know, for more personal development advice or understanding like how do people actually make this jump. And I
Right.
love how you mentioned you knew you didn't want to stay in the sports aspect industry of it, but you saw
Correct.
a beautiful bridge to what
Mhm.
you learned there into your next step. And I think a lot of us have a hard time finding that bridge at times, you know?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. A lot of people have a hard time doing that, especially when you're in an industry and you're choosing to leave because maybe you see the writing on the wall for whatever reason. I don't want to be here anymore. But I have clients, for example, who work for the government, and after 20 years, they retire you. And if you started working there when you first got out of college, you're not that old, but now you're forced out of a career, forced out. So you have to figure out what to do next. If you're an athlete, then of course we know we have short shelf lives. And most athletic careers don't last 10 years. So most athletes are done playing their sport before they turn 30, and they have to figure out what else to do. And also other industries, let's just say you decide you want to walk away, or you don't want to be a lawyer anymore, or you don't like the medical industry, or whatever it happens to be, or you get fired. Maybe you just get downsized and outsourced. Your job gets outsourced to India. Now you got to figure out what to do. So a lot of people do have trouble finding that pivot. The thing with me was I was already looking for the pivot while I was still in the previous place, because I
Yeah.
knew that that road eventually ended. And I also knew who I was. I knew I had a lot more to offer the marketplace besides just talking about playing a sport. Now, for the people who get forced out, they are in a more, I guess you call it a more desperate slash urgent situation, Caitlin. But sometimes that's actually good because it moves people off of their butts and makes them go do something that they otherwise might not do. So there's, I think, pros and cons to both sides of it, depending on how you end up in that situation.
Yeah, totally. And I love how you mentioned taking action. I think that that's a lot of what can stop us. I call that like freeze mode
Hmm.
um, for this show where people are overwhelmed by
Right.
decision making, and it sounds like you would be able to obviously help your clients, whatever position they're in, if they even haven't made that jump yet,
Hmm.
and deciding, okay, what makes the most sense? What's the most profitable? What's the market telling me? Back in 2020, the influx of entrepreneurs, it was like the perfect timing for you to debut with, hey, I already have this experience, but now I'm, going all in working with these specific clients. And did you mostly attract your clients through YouTube? I just want to mention for our listeners, I was totally swayed by the YouTube video that you emailed me. And
Oh
we
yeah.
figured out that we grew up in a similar area and used to
Mm.
be at the same mall. And I want
Yeah.
our listeners to understand how those similarities can really create a stronger relationship, whether it's a podcast guest or potential lead for a client too.
Yeah. So your question was, did most people find me through YouTube?
Yeah, tell us more about your
Um,
YouTube journey, how you've kind of like crafted your style, because I find your approach is unique. It's so good.
well, thank you. So, actually, overall, no, it wasn't actually YouTube, but I would say, actually, it is and it isn't. So, because I've been publishing content since 2005, my first 10 years online, I was publishing a lot of basketball stuff, and that was how a lot of people came to know me. Now, the thing is, even if someone does not become a professional athlete in basketball, they eventually still stop playing at some point, or they play a lot less, right? So it's not their life anymore because when you're 16, you might think you're going to go to the NBA, but then when you get to college, you realize maybe you're not that good. So you keep playing, but it's not your whole thing anymore, like just basketball. So what happens is a lot of players who were very dedicated to basketball in 2012 know me from the basketball stuff on YouTube. They moved on to other things and they may leave my world because either I stopped talking about basketball while they were still playing or they stopped playing while I was still talking about basketball. So they move on to listening to other people and they find their way back around to me and they say, I get this all the time. People say to me, Dre, wow, because I didn't present myself like this when I was in the basketball space. Let's put it that way. And they say, "Wow, Dre, I see the change. I see the evolution in what you're doing. Like you're doing this business stuff thing now. You're still doing your thing. You're consistent, but it's on a completely different topic. I really appreciate that." So there are people in my coaching program to this day who know me from my life as a basketball player, but they're not playing basketball anymore. They have their own businesses, they have their own careers, they're full-time contractors, they have wives and kids, and they knew me from back there. So some of them do know me from the YouTube days. I would say maybe about 40% of our members right now. Now, on the other side, we work with a lot of professionals. So these are licensed professionals. These may be people in the finance space, doctors, lawyers, accountants, salespeople, in insurance. These type of people are in my audience, and most of them, they do not have the time to be looking at YouTube videos, TikTok, Instagram. They're not doing. They don't know anything about any of that stuff. So whatever I'm doing on those platforms, they know nothing about it. What they do, because, and I find this a lot, especially with high level professionals, the only internet stuff they engage in is they listen to podcasts. That's what they do. They listen to podcasts. So they will find me on a show like this one and say, Dre, I stumbled across you on Caitlin's show. And then I found out you had a show and I started listening to your stuff. And that's how I know you. They don't know anything about anything else I say on the internet. They only know what they hear on these kind of shows because they have time for the internet when they're driving to work, coming home, and maybe when they're washing dishes or working out. That's it. So it's like you have two completely different audiences, even though I might be saying the exact same thing to both. I understand when I'm live streaming on TikTok, there's 1,000 people watching me who know nothing about this other world. And there are people who have never looked at me on TikTok, but they listen to everything that I say in the audio apps because again, they don't have the capacity to be consuming this social media stuff. So it's a really interesting thing. Now, overall, this is a question you didn't ask, but I'm gonna answer it anyway. If I had to pick a platform for my ideal client, and I can only pick one, it is absolutely platforms like this one. So interviews on platforms like yours, or just material that I put out on my own that's bite-sized enough that they can consume it on their commute and it's consistent. So they know that it's coming out, they can get it, they can get the point, and they can move on.
I love it. It's so good. Honestly, that's how I consume educational knowledge as well. I'm sure you're in the
Right.
same boat. It's like the last thing we have time to do is really scroll anymore,
Right.
unless it's for research purposes, you know, like
Hmm.
there's a strict intention behind it. But yeah, I love hearing your journey, and I just loved your evolution of YouTube and how you got started there, and to hear how your clients are more expanding now. That's exactly what I hope for our listeners as being a marketer, that they can start to understand, you know, for their own companies, or even, you know, we have real estate agents that listen to this. If they don't have their own CEO or LLC position, but they're still trailblazing high achievers in their own industry, like what that looks like. So thank you so much. Can you tell us what you help your clients with the most? Like, is there a really large area of topics that you're seeing repetitively right now with your clients?
Well, the main one is always mindset. Mindset is always the foundation. No matter what you sell, no matter what you teach, I don't care who you are, what your business is, who your client is, there's always a mindset element to what you are doing, because in order to help somebody change their behavior, well, change their outcomes, usually people come to you for the outcome, right? I want to make more money. All right. That's usually the general thing. But in order to change the outcome, you have to change the behavior. And to change somebody's behavior, you have to change the way they think. So mindset is always the foundation. This goes even back to when I was talking to basketball players, trying to teach them how to make a layup with either hand. We had to change the mindset, then change the action, then change the outcome. So it's the same thing with professionals these days, is the mindset is always the foundation. The thing is, however, Caitlin, that almost no one, actually there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, people don't come to me saying, Dre, I need help with mindset. And the reason is because you can't count or measure mindset. It's intangible. So people tend to not value it as much as they should until they really understand the value of it. And they can't really understand the value of it unless you've done a good amount of study on it or you've been coached on it. So it's kind of like this catch 22, the chicken and egg question when it comes to mindset. So other than that answer, this is kind of a cheating answer. It's true, but it's kind of a cheating answer. I'll give you the other one that's more tangible. It's the systems. Is the systems that people need. I happen to be a person who thinks in systems. I think in processes. I think in putting a structure around anything that I'm doing consistently. How can I just create a plan around this so I can do it the same way every time? I'm the type of person who, when I'm traveling, I have a note in my iPhone that is my packing list. And all I do is check every time I put something in the suitcase, I check the box until every box is checked. And after I travel, I uncheck all the boxes. So the next time I travel, I just do it all over again. So I'm the type of person who makes processes and systems for everything. And that's the biggest thing that a lot of people need. First of all, they have to find out what works, because they might not even know what works, or they already have things working. The thing is, it's just very chaotic because they're doing everything. It's almost like they have to have 8 arms like an octopus doing everything. So what I help them do is put systems and processes in place such that they can do the same things the same way every time. That's what I tell every entrepreneur and professional I work with. The same things the same way every time. And that's when you start to have a system. And also, a lot of people I work with are small business owners, so they have people working for them. So how do we put the process in place so that the people working for you don't mess up because you give them the right system? And if they're not producing the right outcome, we have to look at the system, not just the person. So that's the main thing, is the system, but underneath the main thing is the real main thing, which is the mentality, because they have to change the way they think to even understand and accept that we need to make a system in the first place. Because if they don't accept they need a system, they won't do it. Right. So that's why mindset is always the foundation.
I really appreciate the mindset aspect. I just, in my own experience, I remember living a life thinking that this was the most productive way of doing something until
Mm-hmm.
I launched my company, and I had to become more fluid with what was happening, how to communicate with people, how
Mm-hmm.
not to tie in my own beliefs or project them onto a potential client, um, and how much that had probably impacted growth, you know, at the beginning.
Right.
So I really appreciate, yeah, that just awareness of the thought or the belief or whatever you may be helping with your clients, and then
Right.
being able to like rework that. Is there any other pieces of advice that you find yourself giving, you know, to your clients, or is there maybe one thing that you see them doing, like the same thing that you mentioned? Is there one similar thing that we could give our listeners? A lot of them are service providers, if that helps as well. They're not so much product-based businesses.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is you want to systematize what you're doing to the point that maybe eventually you could step back a little bit from the business while the business continues to run. And this is even a challenge to someone like myself. Like my business was based around my expertise and people being having an affinity for me. So even in this moment, one of the things that I'm working on, not right at this moment, but right now working on is making sure that I can systematize every single thing that I'm doing. And I know how to systematize things. I know how to kind of explain things in excruciating detail to where I can hand it off to someone else. So let's say I hand it all my whole SOPs to you. You could technically operate my business, right? If you executed everything that I have documented. The challenge for a lot of people is the documentation because it is extremely tedious the first time you're doing it. But I tell people the same thing that I'll tell your audience is that if you do it right the first time, you won't have to do it again. Only thing you had to do is update the documentation. And the example that I give to people is I worked at McDonald's when I was a senior in high school. And one time I saw the main manager of the restaurant, her name was Kathy. She was walking around with this big binder, really thick binder in her arm, and she had on a white polo shirt, and the logo on the shirt said Hamburger University. Now I thought it was a joke. I thought maybe they just call it that because you work at McDonald's, you're a manager, so you're going to Hamburger University. Come to find out, Hamburger University is a real place. It's based in Chicago. And when you are an owner or operator or franchisee of a McDonald's, you actually go to Hamburger University and they teach you how to run a McDonald's. And then they give you that binder that shows you exactly how it's operated. Because even if you buy a McDonald's as a franchisee, anyone who knows anything about franchising, you can't just do what you want to do. You do what they tell you to do. And they tell you exactly how to do it. Everything's in that binder. So she was carrying around that binder that basically told her, here's how you manage a McDonald's. The point being, McDonald's, I think everyone can agree, does not have the best food. We don't even know if it's real food, right? So, but at the same time, they sell more burgers than everybody. And everyone can agree that there's a burger place in your town that's better than McDonald's that sells 1% as many burgers as McDonald's sells. So why do they sell so many burgers? It's not because their product is so great. And what I want people to understand here, reading between the lines, your service does not necessarily have to be the best service in town. It should be, but it doesn't have to be. If you have a great system, you are going to do great business because your system is going to do more heavy lifting than your talent. And you don't want your business to be based on talent because number one, that will require you. And that means as soon as you stop, the business stops. Or number two, it will require you getting a bunch of talented people. And the fact of the matter is, there ain't that many talented people out there. And they may not be as talented as they look on their resume or in a job interview. You want a business that even if you have a bunch of people who are not really that smart, you can still win, such as, again, how talented do you have to be to work at McDonald's? All right, you don't have to be talented at all. You can be pretty dumb and work at McDonald's. As long as you can look at the picture and put the cheese right there and the burger right there, you can work at McDonald's. And that's why they're about to replace everybody with robots. That's a different conversation for a different day. The whole point is that you want to have a system that is so tight that the system becomes the star of the show rather than you as an individual being the star of the show. And this is especially important for people in service-based businesses because usually when we have a service-based business, we almost always start out as the star. And then when things start working, we keep being the star. And then eventually we get to a point like, this business will stop running if the star goes away. What do I do? That's why you got to start systematizing what you're doing. So eventually you don't have to be the star anymore. You basically replace yourself, which is an ego thing that is challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs to replace themselves and get out the way. But when you really understand the value of it, then you actually want to do it.
Oh, it's so good. It's like perfect timing that we did this recording when we're doing it because this is definitely the season that I'm in.
Right. Right.
And the ego can be really strong,
That's
in
right.
these moments. So
Mhm.
I am soaking in every second of everything that you said and almost what I'm thinking we can call the episode, especially for my podcast manager listening, is like scaling is in the details. Like that's how you
Right.
scale, is really looking at these micro analytical tasks and being able to explain them to people that maybe have no clue like what I'm talking about, even though luckily my team has some and a lot of marketing backgrounds as we
Mhm.
grow as a society. It's constantly changing. I mean, everything's changing almost every day. It feels like an online business.
Yes, and what you just said there is a alliterative thing that I heard you say is that scaling is in the system. So I don't know if anybody's even using that. Maybe I'll go buy that domain name. But
Yeah.
scaling is in the system, right? That's the that's the thing, that if you can create a system, then you give yourself the potential for scaling. But if the
Yeah.
system is just you being a genius and being super talented, which most of your listeners probably are geniuses and really talented at what they do, is usually the reason why we get into business. The problem is the business is all based on you, and you become an inmate inside your own prison of the business. So a book that you're probably familiar with, and you probably told your audience, is the E-Myth Revisited, and it's all about that. Is making sure that even though you started the bakery because you love to bake cakes, eventually you got to get out the kitchen, right? And you have to create the system. That's the whole point.
Yeah, it's so good. Even on the episode and episodes in the past, I've said like I created my own jail cell
That's right.
being business, you get out of corporate, you think, wow, I have so much freedom. And then our beliefs recreate the exact same thing that we just ran away from.
Right.
So I'm so grateful for you coming on. And I know our listeners are really going to gravitate towards you, especially as they're looking to scale to that 7-figure mark. I know I am. So can you tell us how to get in touch with you, how we can possibly start to work with you and see your options too?
Sure. Well, I'm on all the social medias as we talked about. So whichever ones people like, I'm on all of them, actively publishing every single day. Now, the best place to find out more about working with us is you can go to dreuniversity.com or workonyourgameuniversity.com. It's called Work on Your Game University, but I was streaming on TikTok and somebody said Dre University in the comments. And I said, I should get that domain name too and just route them to the same place. So if you go to dreuniversity.com, you'll learn more about our program, how it works. And you can reach out to us, schedule a time to talk to us. You can email. My assistant gets all my emails, so we'll make sure it gets routed to the proper place.
Thank you so much. And for our multitasker listeners, as you all know, all the links are in the show notes. DM me. I'll connect you with Dre and his assistant and his team so you all can learn how to really scale. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me on, Caitlin. I appreciate the opportunity and for you sharing your platform.
Of course, anytime.